In late April 1996, a man with an IQ of 66 and no military or shooting experience went to Port Arthur and committed the worst mass shooting in Australian history. That's the official story anyway. According to reports, he did this with military precision, shots to the head from the hip with extreme accuracy. The government of the day used this tragedy to slam through policies that took away Australian citizens' guns. People died, and the government used their deaths to push their own agenda to take away our right to self-defense and firearm ownership. Whether you believe a man with an IQ deemed low enough to qualify for a disability pension was capable of such an act is for you to decide. There will be a source list in the description to assist. This video is not to discuss the veracity of the story, it's to discuss the aftermath and what happened since that fateful day. It's to show you that despite some of the strictest self-defense regulations in the world, we Australians are no safer. Quite the opposite, in fact. We are now much less safe than we were in 1996, and the reason should scare the poop out of you. Before we continue, for some amazing karma, please check out Subscribestar, where for as little as $5 a month you can support my work and help save Western civilization.
The first shooting happened around 10:15 last night. Paramedics were called here to Huntley Court to treat a man with gunshot wounds. Then around 20 minutes later, another man was shot in Morris Court, which is just around the corner from here.
As of March 5th, 2019, Melbourne had 4 fatal shootings in 4 days. The individuals in question were not Australian, showing, as always, that diversity is our strength. Suspects' names are Ali, Abdullah and Mikhail, among others. Multiculturalism really is the gift that keeps on giving, but that's not the topic or the point of discussion. This is from the Herald Sun, and I quote, "Police are hunting up to 8 fugitives after a wave of Melbourne gun murders linked to gang conflicts. 4 men have been shot dead since last Friday, and senior officers on Tuesday conceded there was a proliferation of illegal guns in Australia, despite tough new laws trying to stem the black market flow of firearms. Since July 1st last year, the Australian Border Force has detected more than 1,100 illegal guns and firearm parts and accessories nationwide." End quote. Good thing we have draconian firearm laws, otherwise we wouldn't have fatal shootings. Isn't it great our government took our rights away? Ha, yes, that was sarcasm. Strictly restricting access to legal firearms was supposed to stop this kind of crime and make us all safer. So what's up? If those in favour of these laws were right in their arguments, then this kind of thing should never happen. The argument made by the establishment is that taking away our right to self-defense with a weapon would make us all safer. No firearm equals no murder, according to them. Only this isn't true at all. The murder rate in 2002 was in fact significantly higher than it was in 1996, 8 years after the John Howard government cheated us out of our rights. It then continued on the trend that started in the 80s, dropping from what was already a relatively low annual homicide rate of 2 per 100,000 people. This matched the worldwide homicide trend, so essentially gun control made zero difference in Australia to the number of murder victims, despite the claims of the establishment, we are no safer. The reason for this should be obvious to anyone who is capable of basic reasoning. Murder is about more than the weapon used. If criminals aren't able to use a firearm, they are going to use something else. The idea that a government can say, "No more guns," and crooks will suddenly stop committing crime is demonstrably false. It's actually ridiculous. As a simple example, murder rates in the Middle Ages, when guns were almost non-existent, was a hell of a lot higher. Criminals don't follow the law. Restrictions only affect law-abiding citizens, as should be blindingly obvious. Either way, there are now more than 3 million guns in the hands of individuals, almost the same number of firearms as there were in 1996. According to anti-self-defense advocates, the murder rate should be as high as it was back then. Sure, now firearms are concentrated in the hands of far fewer people, but that's hardly a good thing and only explains why people are choosing other weapons. For more information on this, I'll link in the description to Stefan Molyneux's video, The Truth About Gun Control. He goes over all the stats and facts and proves, without a doubt, that gun control does not work and has nothing to do with individual safety. Firearms don't kill people. People kill people. No weapon in the history of weapons has ever killed anyone of its own accord, because weapons aren't conscious beings capable of independent thought or free will. People aren't limited to items designed for that purpose either. On the 21st of December 2017, Saeed Nouri, a very Australian name there, drove a van into a crowd of Christmas shoppers in Melbourne CBD. From The Australian, and I quote, "A court heard Nouri was a self-described ISIS sympathiser who yelled Allahu Akbar as he rammed his mother's SUV into a crowded intersection on Melbourne's Flinders Street on December 21st, 2017, killing grandfather Antonius Kroukaris and leaving more than a dozen people injured." Crown Prosecutor Mark Gibson SC asked the judge Elizabeth Hollingsworth to hand down a life sentence in a bid to curb the growing global trend of vehicles being used as weapons in attacks. Mr. Gibson cited vehicle attacks in Nice, Berlin, Melbourne's Burke Street, London, Stockholm, Charlottesville, and Barcelona as examples. End quote. At the time, the mainstream media called this attack a case of mental illness and tried to pretend it wasn't Islamic terror, proving, as usual, that the mainstream media cannot be trusted. MSM lies notwithstanding, if lunatics can't use firearms to commit a terrorist attack, they will use any weapon they can. They'll use trucks, knives, baseball bats, or anything they can get their hands on. Clearly, the problem is more complex than a simplistic solution of ban weapons. In Victoria, where this attack took place, we've seen a huge increase in violent crimes from the early 2000s, mostly in assault, but also sexual offences, stalking and harassment, and dangerous behaviour. Melbourne just so happens to be one of the places non-European foreigners flock to when they come to Australia, but again, this isn't the topic of discussion for this video, so moving on. There is a very good reason the US founding fathers passed the Second Amendment, and it had nothing at all to do with stopping crime. It is about resisting tyrannical government and preventing governments from taking away the rights of citizens. One of the first things dictators always do is to disarm their population in order to stamp out any resistance. Disarmament also happens to be what precedes genocides. No government ever took away citizens' guns for benevolent reasons. Anyone who claims otherwise is either lying or ignorant of historical reality. With that in mind, take the following as a warning from the Herald Sun, and I quote, 800 semi-automatic rifles will be issued to Victoria police officers in a big boost to combat crime. Frontline police and specialist officers will be given the weapons to help police overpower terrorists and crazed attackers. Victorian Police Association Secretary Wayne Gatz said, "In the current environment, with the increased threat of terrorism and mass casualty events facing our members and the community, having additional tactical options like these long-arm firearms at the disposal of potential first responders will help our members to protect the community they serve. Given the time it can take to get specialist units to country areas, it is critical that our regional members have access to the weapons should they be called to respond to a terrorist or mass casualty incident." End quote. Yeah, totally. It's for our own safety, everyone. It has nothing at all to do with policing citizens and growing government power. The late great comedian Bill Hicks summed this situation up for us as succinctly as possible in only the way that he could.
Go back to bed, America. Your government is in control again. Here's American gladiators. Watch this. Shut up. Go back to bed, America. Here's American gladiators.
Go back to sleep, Australia. Your government has everything under control.
The state took away our right to bear arms, And at the same time, they arm themselves to the teeth. If you believe that's for our own safety, then I'll give you $1 million. You just need to send $5,000 to an offshore bank account in order to cover transaction costs. Taking away self-defense rights from law-abiding citizens does not make us any safer. Quite the contrary, in fact. Gun control has made Australians less safe and more prone to tyrannical takeover. It's removed the ability of peaceful individuals to defend themselves while keeping guns in the hands of criminals and the government. But I repeat myself. Meanwhile, the same treasonous elites import millions of people from non-European nations in a direct replacement and invasion of the white majority. They take away our freedoms in one breath and destroy our country in the next. The final word on this issue comes from Stefan Molyneux's video previously referred to.
If you are for gun control, then you are not against guns, because the guns will be needed to disarm the people. So it's not that you are anti-gun. You need the police's guns to take away other people's guns. So you are very pro-gun. You just believe that only the government, which is of course so reliable, honest, moral, and virtuous, should be allowed to have guns. There is no such thing as gun control. There is only centralizing gun ownership in the hands of a small political elite and their minions. And if you think that is a safe approach to take, I've got 250 million dead people in the 20th century alone, outside of war, murdered by their own governments, almost exclusively after having been disarmed first, mostly by lies.
Wake up, Australia. Wake up before it's too late. I hope you enjoyed the video. Share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya.